We'll go under review.
Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for being here on this week's episode of Under Review. I would normally say Tuesday evening, but it is actually Sunday evening at a 7:11 p.m. as I am pre-recording in advance of the holiday. And this is right after the Bills get a huge 40-14 victory over the New York Jets. Aaron Rodgers remains winless in Orchard Park, but even more importantly, doesn't throw his career touchdown pass, and the Bills lock down the 2 seed ahead of the upcoming playoffs, a gauntlet that we have grown to expect from this team, given the standard of winning that Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane and Josh Allen have set for this franchise. It is an awesome position to be in, and we are going to reflect on this win and the strengths and the weaknesses of the Buffalo Bills offense and defense ahead of the playoffs. And when I say we, I never just mean me. I mean me and my wonderful guest, and that is Mr. Anthony Prohaska returning to the show. Anthony, I appreciate your time pre-recording with me on this Sunday evening. How you doing, man?
I'm good. It's feels weird recording on a Sunday. Like my internal clock and rhythm is not set, but I'm pumped. I appreciate every time you have me on the show. And it's nice to be able to link up. Like I feel like my schedule is so hectic between pod stuff and life stuff. So kind of making everything mesh and fit for the two of us to link up. It doesn't happen as often as I would like it to. So I'm pumped to be here and talk about this. And yeah, holiday time. It's fun. It's nice. I'm excited. Thank you for having me.
Of course, man. Yeah, you're always welcome back. And I feel that on a spiritual level, the holidays are nuts. I have probably taken about 6 trains in 2 weeks. I don't think I'm exaggerating. I've done a lot of traveling. The bags under my eyes are heavy. My voice sounds depleted. My spirit sounds broken, but I am not. I'm as jolly as ever. And that is because apart from a wonderful holiday, we also got a wonderful 2 weeks from the Bills, really, but specifically this week with just an absolute dominant win over the New York Jets, 40-14, but really felt like 40-0 until Tyrod Taylor came into the game. Josh Allen, it wasn't a perfect day, but it was a steady day for him. Passes were completed. Key plays were made. The rushing attack was effective and efficient. Really just domination on both sides of the ball, even though early on it didn't feel like you were going to get that from the defense. And you walk away from this game with the 2 seed yet again. You know you have the home field for anyone but Kansas City. And it's a good position to be in for a team that in the midst of a transitional year you had a lot of questions about, ultimately ends up just silencing all of those things in full by having a team that not only got the 2 seed, but also set a franchise record for points scored. Josh Allen sets his 5th year in a row going 40 touchdowns. Just really exceptional stuff from a team you had questions about. So, and before we get into this game specifically, I know this wasn't on the topic sheet. Of course I did this, but I just want to ask you, like, reflecting on the season a bit, because even though the season isn't over, we got one more week. It's very likely that these starters aren't playing next week. Yeah. Just talk to me like about that, the transitional year, quote unquote, this team was going, and whether your expectations were met, whether they exceeded expectations, whether things were different as far as this team and the path they've been on, the success they've had relative to what the offseason narrative was for them.
They definitely exceeded expectations for me. I thought just with the way the season was going to go, and I kind of said it a lot through the offseason. So much of my offseason work was focused on, okay, the way like the roster was changing a little bit, the way the league trends were happening offensively. I spent so much time diving in and doing film work on like the Rams and the Lions and the Texans and these teams that were leaning into, heavier personnel groupings, bigger bodied wide receivers, condensed formations and reduced formational width, different run game aspects, and how that was all kind of coming together for the Bills. But then knowing they lost Stephon Diggs, a slight change on the offensive line, but I thought that slight change could potentially be a little bigger. Everything that was happening, and then Milano gets hurt right before camp, which kind of influenced that even further for me. I really had not a super wide variance. I thought they would still, be kings of the AFC East, but I really thought they could go in a variety of ways. Like if you told me they would have ended up 10-7, I could have believed it. If you told me they were 13-4, I could have believed it. And there were some games that could have gone, the other way. The Detroit game ended up being close. At the time, before the season started, I didn't think the Niners were going to be, hit with the Black Plague in terms of injuries and unfortunate things. So that game ended up being a little different between the Bills and Niners later in the season. but they exceeded my expectations. And you hit on some of the points, just new faces, new places. You lose Stephon Diggs. You've got brand new coaching staff on the defensive side of the ball, essentially. I know some of those guys came in-house, but, Babbage becomes the new DC, and then you've got a new defensive line coach, a new linebackers coach, a new corners coach. Like, Hyde and Poyer are gone. There's all these little tweaks and changes. Leonard Floyd was your most productive pass rushing edge last year. He's gone. There's all these changes that are happening schematically, conceptually, on and off the field. And I thought they'd be a good team. I didn't think they necessarily, like, realistically, I gave that range of what they could have been. I didn't think like them being the 2 seed would have been the most like realistic option. I thought they'd be a playoff team. I thought they'd win the AFC East, but they have exceeded expectations for me. And I hope that doesn't mean that, come playoff time, they turn back into a pumpkin and things kind of like fall apart. And it's like, oh, that's the team I was kind of worried that we'd see. And that would be so Billsy. I hate to say that because like we're past that time, but that would be so Bills to like overachieve and exceed expectations in the regular season and then come playoff time be like, oh, that's what I was afraid of. And of course it happens now, single elimination aspect. But yeah, they've definitely exceeded expectations for me, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I thought so much of this year would be determined by Joe Brady pushing the right buttons and pulling the right levers at the right time. And he has for a good majority of the year. He and Aaron Kromer have been tremendously in sync when it comes to the run game, pass protection, how it's all tied together, the layering and the sequencing and the building that he's had throughout the year. So yeah, they definitely exceeded my expectations that I thought they could hit, but in terms of being realistic or the most probable, they definitely exceeded what I thought was going to happen.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with that because when I did my show about their record prediction, what the floor and ceiling could be, my floor was about 9, maybe 10 wins. My ceiling was about 12. I thought realistically I could see about 11 wins, and that's still not a bad team. Like you alluded to, it's a team that could win the East, make the playoffs, but it's a team that has exceeded my expectations for numerous reasons. And I'll start with just on the offensive side of the ball. The question marks I had, similar to you about the offensive line, the skill position group, they were there. But really Josh Allen too, because what this felt like to me was this is the potential to have what the Chiefs went through a couple years ago when they lose Tyreek Hill and Mahomes is now having to answer the questions about what it looks like without that weapon, that guy. Granted, still have Travis Kelce. And for the Bills, got Amari Cooper. So it's not like at the 1-for-1 comparison and the talent was still there for them, but rather that like this is really the first time that we're going to get a Josh Allen where now we look at him as the real veteran. There isn't that guy that's like trying to, like, at least going into the season, like he is the guy that you're turning to and saying, you are our franchise guy. We are depending on you. This offense and scheme are not just being built around the talent and your ability to use that talent, but rather around you. We are trying to invest into you, all stock into you, full send. And if this doesn't work, this is going to be problematic. And so you basically need to button up, brush your shoulders, and be that guy we need you to be now that we're in the wake of some major changes. And he does. I think that this Josh Allen, even though I still consider 2020 his best year still, even though I think he's had a great year, I think this version of Josh isn't just one that I'm so happy to see, but one that I feel is completely sustainable for as he continues in his career, as he gets older. He's still taking the hits. He's still running, but also he's being more patient. They're playing a more efficient game. The run game marries with the pass game, and they're able to play complementary offense, which keeps these drives alive. Doesn't have to consistently put too much on Josh's shoulders, but Josh has also been able to be locked in and kind of clean up some of the things, at least to a better degree than last year, that we had worries about. I think even deep ball accuracy being one of the pain points that seems to have improved, at least in the recent weeks. You could talk about decision-making being an overall improvement, and then just those little Superman components of Josh still being there. It feels like what you got was the most mature version of Josh Allen, and therefore a version that I think can carry himself into the 30s, still being successful, but in turn carry this franchise in the midst of major change. And that's very reassuring, very relieving, because I don't even think the roster around Josh Allen is the best it could possibly be yet. Like, in this version of him, right? Like, this offense has weapons. This offense has talent. This offensive line, you alluded to Aaron Kromer, who I still think they should build a statue for outside of the new stadium. Like, this offensive line has been physical, downhill running, but also really nice pass protection paired with Josh Allen's ability to keep plays alive and extend them. But you're getting this roster that, while it's still good, I feel like could be even better in the coming years when cap space opens up and draft picks start to come in. Maybe you move on from a guy like Amari Cooper, bring in a young guy who actually develops and does well. Like, there's a very real ceiling for this team, but I think they haven't even met it yet. And that's why I'm so excited and why this year is so big for me and why I bring this question up, because I feel like even just on the offensive side of the ball, they exceeded expectations in ways that I feel are sustainable, where this roster turnover didn't truly slow their pace down. We'll see what it looks like in the playoffs, but it's still super encouraging for the future of the org. And moving to defense, this defense is definitely not the best version of itself, but even then, making plays, generating turnovers, scoring off of turnovers as consistently as they are. There's concern over whether that's luck, whether that's sustainable. I think that it is sustainable for the sole reason that they are generating these plays. They are the ones causing the fumble. They are the ones mixing the coverages and being able to create those opportunities. So all in all, when you talk about season expectations, they've exceeded mine. I know you said they exceeded yours, and it's super reassuring that the way they've done it to me is just a way that I feel like you could continue building off of. Even if they lose Joe Brady, even if they lose some pieces, this upcoming offseason because they have free agents, I feel like we're still going to get better versions of this roster in future years, and fans should be excited for that. So it's fun. And any more points on this before we carry on to the next topic?
No, I think that was also really well said, kind of just add on of what it sets them up for the future. Like, you need structurally, and then from a player development standpoint, you really need to hit on as many things as you can once you start. And this isn't Bill specific, but once you start to pay the quarterback that kind of money, you have to start hitting in a variety of ways to supplement the lack of financial capital you have to go elsewhere because you put it all into that quarterback bucket. And yeah, I think it's, again, in this transition year, I never thought it was a full rebuild. I thought this season would be a revamp, but considering some of the players that have risen a bit and stepped their game up, what the new core looks like going for the future, but then also conceptually what this team is and what Allen has become, I do think, to your point, there is some good hope for sustainability going forward. And all of this happening in that revamp year is extremely encouraging.
Absolutely. And, it's exciting because if you're a Bills fan and just thinking of all the things you heard, right? If you're someone who hates Twitter like I do, yet goes on it constantly and hear the toxicity of it, you hear all of the things said about the team, and it drives you nuts, not even just because you want to let these people bother you or fans bother you, but because you kind of worry, like, is this going to happen? Like, you start doubting what's being built, but they've proven that they can overcome that. And again, things had to happen. Things had to change midway through the year. They have to go get Amari Cooper. I'm not blind to that fact. But even then, right before they got Amari Cooper, I saw a Bills team that was running the ball well and moving it through the year just the same. And I think it wasn't going to be a permanent blip or a permanent pattern of terrible offensive performances as much as a rough stretch. And the team seems to have proved that. And now we move to the playoffs in a sense that they have this offense that can meet you in multiple ways. And I'm excited to watch it. And defensively, I have my questions, my concerns, but I do think there is hope in the sense that even if it's not perfect, they can still get the takeaways and keep this offense alive, which is what you need to do when you have Josh Allen. So, and moving on to this game itself, a 40-14 beatdown of the New York Jets, really just, it was probably like halfway competitive through the first quarter and second quarter, and then it seemed to just slip out of their grasp. Aaron Rodgers was just not sharp. His pocket presence was not present, to be nice. And it really was just it was just the total beatdown of a division rival, which, listen, I know they're a hopeless mess. They're 4-12 now. They're the 11th seed in the AFC, picking in the top 10. But like, that's still a Jets team that had some offensive momentum going into this game. So to also be able to have Aaron Rodgers' crew put up a goose egg before Taylor comes in is awesome. And give me your good, your bad, your ugly, your awesome from this game that you wanted to point out in advance of the season coming to a close.
It's weird defensively. They started out like the Jets moved the ball really well. And the Bills, I tweeted it like after that first drive where they got stopped on fourth down, like the Jets came up, it empty drive in terms of points, but it looked like the Bills really chasing their tail early on. But this game just kind of followed like another Bills game script that doesn't seem sustainable, where it's like, they look really outmatched early on. And then as the game goes on, I also tweeted too, like in the second half of games, like they turn into the Monstars. Like that's just what they are. It's just a beatdown offensively and defensively, the way they turn and adjust. But I still do have some concerns about the defense, which we'll obviously get into as they head towards the playoffs here. And I do have some concerns about the offense as well. I'm very interested to see the tape from this game, because the one thing I tweeted it after the Patriots game, and it's something we saw with the Ravens, something we saw with the Texans, and especially, in general before they got Amari Cooper, the lack of true separators offensively and how teams with good and or athletic corners are going to be able to give them problems in single high coverage, either cover 3 where you're really it's zone, but you're still getting kind of a lot of one-on-one matchups outside, or cover 1 where it's straight up man on the outside. Allen, if we notice today, holding onto the ball, pulling it down, making some plays out of structure, off script, I feel like once I look at the all 22, I'm going to see a lack of separation from a one-on-one standpoint, which again kind of makes sense, not to be, negative or detractor. The Bills don't have a ton of true separators on this offense. Even Shakir, for as awesome as he is, isn't necessarily a true separator, but he's still awesome. Kincaid has some separation ability, but isn't this like easy man coverage beater in a variety of ways against anybody you put him up against. Cooper used to be that, hasn't been as much the past couple of years and even this year as well. So it's kind of like various levels of it. And I do think this is an offense that is more scheme dependent when it comes to separation and generating that than it is like, not to bring this up, but just low hanging fruit from a comparison standpoint. Like you knew Diggs, like, okay, yo, Diggs, go beat that guy one-on-one. Like just go get open. Also, one quick note on Diggs that I do find it's funny. All the people the last couple of weeks, when there's been like the detractors for Amari Cooper, all the voices that have come out and been like, yeah, but he's got gravity and he's drawing coverage. He's not washed. Like he's still having a good impact. I really wanted to be like, how come that wasn't said for Stephon Diggs down the stretch when he was getting doubled and tripled and coverage rolled his way, but he was just washed and we were ignoring the gravity or ignoring him cooking L'Jarius.
He's not the same receiver, Ant. He's not the same receiver.
All these things. I think it's so funny how we flip these narratives and conversational elements based on how we feel emotionally, but I digress a little bit. Fair. So I do think some of that will show up on the tape. And again, the Jets have a very good defense. Lost in all of this again is another year where the Jets have a good defense and their offense is just so bad that it mitigates everything that they're able to do defensively. So I'm interested to see the tape, to see some of the separation pieces and what the instructor passing game looked like. Because again, if you think back to this game right now, the plays that were made through the air, there were some like Allen hits this guy here, or, they have the little escort swing and they fake it and Allen hits Knox or hits something over the middle. But a lot of the passes through the air in this game were generated by Allen holding onto the ball, scrambling, making something happen off script, which is a lot of what the passing game was for the majority of this year. The instructor passing game was a bit behind. Anything they had through the air was really off script or out of structure, and then in conjunction with the run game. So, but overall, it's a good win. It's hard to be too upset when, like you said, essentially this game was like 40-0. I know what it ended up as being the final, but it was essentially 40-0, a true beatdown. The Jets moved the ball early, but the Bills, again, whether it's coming up with timely stops or continuing to kind of buck the trend that turnovers aren't sustainable and that you can't rely on them, they put together a good performance, had some good special teams moments too. So I think you had some positive stuff in all three phases. Good way to kind of continue to push you forward with the opportunity to rest some guys in the final week against New England, get healthy for what is hopefully a long playoff run.
Absolutely. And, all great points that I share a lot of the same sentiment just when you look at this game back. I think offensively, like I said before about Josh Allen, it wasn't a perfect day. I don't think that was all on him. It seemed like what he had open was just like either low-hanging fruit or something that he had to make open. But, it's going to look in the box score as like low completion percentage. But I thought Allen played fine, and I thought he was still seeing the field well. There were a couple plays where he stepped up in the pocket and had nice throws. I think there was one to Hollins. There was one to Shakir over the middle. I like seeing Coleman come across the middle of the field. I'd like to see them do that a bit more if they can, because I like Coleman's involvement. But you're right. It felt like downfield is, even for the past couple of weeks, has been a bit of a struggle. They're not a team that's just going to have, these receivers go and like these long, whether it's a post or a go route, something towards the end zone and just win that consistently. It's usually going to be a dogfight or a grind. And if Josh doesn't see it open right away, I think honestly this offense feels like it builds itself upon Josh just knowing he can roll to his right and give them the extra bit of time to create that separation. And I think a lot about Detroit and that Keon Coleman deep shot that was almost a touchdown as being like the glaring example of this. Like Coleman, I don't want to say he got like beat on that rep as much as it wasn't like this super wide open thing where he was getting insane separation like that Addison touchdown earlier today, he just, dude, he's unreal. And he would have been so sick in Buffalo, but I digress. You see Coleman, he's like still close to his DB, but then when Allen rolls right and Coleman can leak behind them, that's the separation, that's getting open. And then you also trust Coleman's frame to be able to win in that spot. And I feel like that's kind of what this offense builds itself on, is like, hey, if we can't truly separate, we're either going to scheme somebody open, or we know that if Allen could just get a little bit of time in the pocket, that separation will just happen because he's holding the ball. These DBs can't cover forever. Someone's bound to break open. And also the Z-axis of Josh Allen being able to go across the field and hit someone in a ridiculous way, like today to Keon Coleman. Those are the examples of him being able to do it. And I think the Bills are not blind to this fact. And I feel like, you've said this before, but like, that's kind of the point of building like a little bit more of a physical room, like where you have guys that can win those contested situations. Because if you're not going to separate, but you just got hands guys with big bodies that are able to win 50-50, then it didn't matter if they separate or not, they got the catch. And that was on display today against a stubborn, stingy secondary that was depleted of Gardner at some point. But I feel like when you talk about playoffs and concerns, which we'll get into, it is something I worry about, but also something I feel like can set the tone at the same time for an offense. And that's something I'm looking forward to as well.
And so that's, I think, an important point too, because it ties into what they're able to do with the run. Like they sacrificed like the separation ability or the speed element, the shifty ability that kind of like a Jordan Addison, for example, it's kind of low hanging fruit. Like that's a guy, crisp, clean route runner, separator, more juice to his game. He's not going to be the run blocker that Mac Collins is, or that Keon Coleman is, or hell, even Khalil Shakir is. So it's all this. It's just one giant game of resource allocation, right? And anybody who's ever played an RPG in any way, shape, or form, like, okay, do I want more of like an offensive build? Do I want a little more defensive build? Like
Earthquake Protect. That's nice. Sorry, I don't know if you played Coliseum or not, but that's all. That's
a good one. My cousin was crazy at a Coliseum. I like that. That's good. That was really good. That took me completely out of my train of thought. I like that.
It's my favorite game of all time, man.
Oh, fun fact. Okay. Oh, I don't know.
Yeah. Sorry, I totally threw you off your point.
No,
that's my bad.
I always think, I don't know what my favorite game of all time is. I'd really have to think. I have a lot of contenders. But Coliseum's a fun one. But you can't this isn't a game where you can max out like all your bars or like everything. Like it's not that thing. So, okay, if you're going to dip into this bucket, that means you have to take away from this other bucket. And part of the reason the run game has been so versatile and multiple and worked in a bunch of ways is because you've got bigger bodied wide receivers. You've got guys at that position that have a combination of size and athleticism that allow them to function in the pass, but also in the run. Now, that means you might be a little more deficient when it comes to the separation game, but usually guys that can separate more leave you a little more deficient in the run game as far as multiplicity and the variety that you can hit to. So I think that's part of it too. Like it's not just, I think someone might hear that and be like, well, they don't have separators. The passing game sucks. It's like, no, not necessarily, but also the lack of separation is tied to the room that they tried to create at those skill positions because of how it would tie into the run game, all leading into this current trend of offensive football and how offenses are attacking defenses. And obviously it's worked on a large scale for the Bills. You just hope it can work in as many matchups as possible, which is what the playoffs are all about.
It'll get more difficult for sure, and it is a question I have. But, going further just into this game alone, too, that offensively, I was pleased with the running game today. I thought there was some stuffs, but for the most part, they were on the ground, able to move the chains a bit, make things easier for Josh, lead to productive drives. It took a little bit of time to figure out in the early part of the game, but once they got to the second half, it felt like they were just able to run a bit more at will. I love Ty Johnson much. I love Ty Johnson. Like we could talk about Cook. We could talk about Ray Davis, who went 6 for 9. Nice. But Ty Johnson to me is just like, when you talk about the pickups that they had, when you talk about value for what they spent on the player, I feel like Ty Johnson, at least in the Bean era, has to be like in that top 5. Like when you just talk about what they ask him to do, how much effectiveness he actually has for how little money he's getting paid. Ty Johnson has been everything you want in this offense when it comes to pass protection, when it comes as a receiver, but also as a runner. He's a good runner. I made a joke to someone a few weeks back that he would be running back 1 on the Raiders, but I kind of stand by it, dude. Like he's, and I know his skill set's a little more niche, but he's got the burst, he's got the physicality, he's hard to bring down. And
he's the best pass protector they have at the running back spot. He's a very good blocker and pass protector.
Absolutely. And every time they turn to him, when they need to turn to him, there's always productivity. So just shout out to him. But offensively, I was pleased. Defensively, we kind of touched on it a little bit. But that early part of the game concerned me, just watching how easy it was for the Jets to run at will. And then when you get to the second half, they bear down, right? Like they definitely bear down. They improved in their run defense, like in between the tackles, even outside. It felt like they were very much like we were fine. We buttoned up and we were able to be more solid, get off the blocks a bit more, also threaten Rodgers a bit more. Game script gets away from the Jets, and that also impacts it too. I have some concerns, and we'll get into the defensive conversation about that specific thing when it comes to a playoff game. But all in all, to keep the vibes positive, at least for this game, when they buttoned it up and when they made those adjustments, the pass rush was effective. I thought Ed Oliver played a pretty good game. I thought Rousseau was awesome. Von Miller got a sack. I was told he's washed. He might be a little bit, but he still got a sack.
He's definitely not washed, but I do like he ran through Carter Warren, who's like their third string right tackle and who doesn't have a lot of reps. So like that was an awesome rep for him to go completely through Warren, but like he didn't go through Lane Johnson. So it's, again, we got to manage all these extremes. Like I feel like the people who are saying how good he is are trying to compensate for all the people who say that he's washed. And so it's like he's somewhere in between, but like we need to like just chill on everything a little bit.
I think he's been good. Like I think that's just the way to put it. Like because the thing is, we've seen the cut-ups and clips that you've posted, that Eric posted, stuff you talked about in the film room, and we know that there's like some component of Von's game that's no longer there, right? Like the bend, the twitch. It's just a 35-year-old man as a pass rusher. That's to be expected coming off his second ACL tear. But like, I also look at Von's pass rush productivity, the pressures he's generating, the ability to make quarterbacks move in the pocket, all things that are the intangibles of a pass rusher. And I say that's still there. And to me, when you talk about the Bills, the pass rushing that they need and what you would ask for in a playoff game, especially paired with someone like Rousseau, who maybe if you flush him to Rousseau's side, can get some hits, be able to close out on sacks. That's still productive to me. And it was nice to see Von get one today. I don't think
he's been better against the run, though, too. Like, not even just from a pass rush perspective. Like, he's been a good run defender, going all the way back to the game one against the Cardinals, where he started to stymie that run a little bit when they were running pin and pull. Sorry, I just wanted to interject that.
No, you're good. And I call it out because it's something that should be called out when you talk about Von, especially ahead of a playoff push. I'm more just excited to have Von for the playoff push. I hope they don't run him out there much next week. I'd love to just keep him fresh, ready for round one, especially if, God forbid, that round one's against Cincy, which I am proud.
Dude, I tweeted it yesterday. I went out to a dinner. I went out to a dinner last night, and I just tweeted it just like to tweet it. And when I left, I checked. I got home late, and it was up to 400 something likes and all these comments. And I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting all this action. Like, yeah, man, it just seems.
I don't want it to happen.
The Bengals have been. Their defense was so hurt, especially, dude. Like, they were so hurt on the interior to start the year. They've gotten a little healthier. Burrow, if the Bengals had a better record, Burrow is definitely in that MVP conversation for the kind of year that he's put together. And I just don't, in a one-game do-or-die single elimination, I don't want to go against Lou Anarumo and Trey Hendrickson and Mike Hilton and their defense, who has always played well against the Bills and been a tough matchup. I don't want to go against Burrow and Chase and Higgins. I don't want to. But also too, you're not going to escape anybody in the playoffs. And I know what happened even in that game. And we'll talk about it a little for the Bills offense. The Broncos defense can kind of give the Bills some problems.
Oh, for sure. They absolutely can.
You're not escaping anybody, but to your point, just from a vibes and paranoia standpoint that lives in my brain, I don't want the Bengals.
My entire stance on this matchup is not so much that I don't have respect for the Bengals. I think their defense is awesome. I think their front seven is one of the best in the NFL. Their interior D-line's sick, but their edge rushers are awesome. Their linebackers are sick. Like the way they cover, they have debatably the best corner in the NFL also, if not top three in Pat Surtain. They're loaded defensively. I guess if you want to call confidence in that matchup would just stem from making Bo Nix come to Buffalo in January to face a Sean McDermott.
But then the thing that goes in that for me is I'm I'm not really too scared of Bo Nix, but I am kind of scared of Sean Payton. And and Payton's the puppet master back there, and their line isn't bad. You're not
tough. It'd be a dogfight. Yes. I think it would be, but I certainly think we'd fare better in that game. And I'm not saying we'd outright lose to Cincy.
No, but I just don't want any parts of it. That is just in my. It's like if I'm the Twins going to the playoffs, give me anybody but the Yankees. Every time the Twins play the Yankees, they lose to the Yankees. Just if I'm the Twins, give me anybody. I don't care if I'm playing the Astros, who won 115 games. Just don't give me the Yankees.
I'd care because I'm a Yankee fan. I don't want to play the Astros in the playoffs anymore either. I wasn't trying to think about baseball on the show, and I'm already mad enough. I can't do this.
That's my fault. I apologize.
It's all good. No, you're good. I'm only messing with you. But like that, yeah, I don't want to deal with Cincinnati in the playoffs. I really don't. If we have to, they have to. Also, if Chase Brown can't play in that game because maybe the ankle sprain's bad enough to sideline him, then without a threat of a rushing attack does make me feel a little bit better, because I don't want to disrespect Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, who are amazing. But if they can't get those consistent early yards, Chase Brown has been unbelievable for them and just such a revelation. Yeah. Not having that explosive runner to worry about does help you a little bit in your game planning. And also, years past against Lou's defense, Lou is good at mixing his coverages up and making you think he's sending 5, not sending 5, or blitzing the shit out of him on those like long downs and distances. But I do think a more aggressive physical Bills offense can help, at least on the ground. Maybe we'll see, but I don't want to think about it. Please win next week, Denver, please. Carson Wentz, 5 picks. I'm begging you. I want nothing to do with Joe Burrow in January. Anyways, Ant, I'm rambling. Let's move on to just now the crux of this conversation, and that's talking about this Bills offense and defense, the pain points and the strengths of this team. We obviously know that this is one of the highest scoring offenses in the league. It is the highest scoring offense, or at least team in Bills history. And we're talking about a lot of positives for them, but there are some holes too, and it's important to cover both when you talk about expectations for what can hopefully be the Bills' first Super Bowl. So I'm going to point it back to you and just ask you to start on offense with what you think are the strengths, the weaknesses, the things you really think are the most relevant that you want to shine on going into the playoffs.
It starts with the run game for me. I know it's the sexiest thing, and it's the thing that everybody wants to talk about. Everybody's always like, the run game, forget Josh Allen. The run game is so sexy. But no, the run game has been the foundation and the aspect all year for me offensively for the Bills that I thought would matter the most for them this year. I think it sets the table. All the proverbials, it's the straw that stirs the drink, anything and everything for this offense. Like you said, a tremendously successful offense. They're overall in the year, they're first in EPA per play. They are 5th in success rate, like overall as a complete offense. But going into the playoffs, what really has been getting me excited, and I did a full episode, film breakdown episode this past week for Disguise coverage on more incorporation of the pistol, which they did not use a bunch today, which I found very, very interesting, depending on how you want to look at it. But it's been all the wrinkles, like more pistol to the run game, more counter, variations of counter, even power, like that they worked into things a little bit, like concepts that they don't necessarily lean into a lot, out of formations that they don't necessarily lean into a lot, out of personnel groupings they haven't necessarily leaned into. Yep, little pony. Like you've got some Reggie Gilliam out there for 21, and Alec Anderson as their 6th offensive lineman lined up as a tight end. We're bringing him in motion. They did one today where it was a 3-by-1. Yeah, and he's the number 1 wide receiver, and they bring him in motion and they run duo, like something that the Rams have done with their tight ends, especially last year with Higbee. It's just all these little wrinkles that they've added going forward these past, really since the Rams game, since the Detroit game, really. And that's got me extremely excited just because I thought the run game was so important already. And throughout the year, they've had 3 core concepts that they're good with, dating really back to last year, even before Joe Brady, going back to the Ken Dorsey piece. Like you could run duo, you could run all the tackle pull stuff, and then Brady had them going into more mid-zone a little bit. This year, that was their flavor that they liked. They'd run that weak side mid-zone run, sprinkle in some others, but it was really weak side mid-zone. That was the thing. But you had that, you had duo, and you had all the tackle pull stuff, both dart, where the tackle's pulling, going to that play side linebacker, and long track, where the tackle's pulling and taking that edge that they're allowing to get upfield. So you had like 3.5 core concepts that you could work in a variety of ways. But now that they're adding more conceptually down the stretch, and they're adding more from a personnel standpoint and from a formation standpoint and a wrinkle standpoint with motion and tempo of motion. And when I say motion, I mean all of it, like the kinds of motion, the timing of it, the tempo of it, what it leads to, what it builds on, all of these pieces, and the pistol, again, all the formational stuff, alignment stuff. That's the thing I'm most encouraged about going forward, because as much as this offense is, Josh Allen, and I get it, especially because he's in the MVP conversation, the run game is really what makes this team go. Some of that run game is Josh Allen as well, but like the non-Josh Allen run game is such a huge piece. And they're 6th in EPA per attempt for running back runs on this year. You've had success with James Cook. You've had success with Ray Davis. You've had some success with Ty Johnson. I just think the run game is going to be so important as a pivot, as a natural element, and then making life easier for Josh Allen so he doesn't have to put the cape on, so he doesn't have to be the mutant alien unicorn all the time. And then if the run game's working, that's good enough in the vacuum. It makes play action even better. If you start to work in Josh Allen with some boots and some movement, you can really put a defense in hell. And you need to, given some of the concerns I have with the in-structure passing game going forward, especially, again, based on the teams that they're probably going to see in this playoff run and the type of secondaries that they're going to come up against.
Yeah, that is the crux of it. And you brought up play action, and that's something I wanted to point out as what could be a strength for them in the playoffs, because we've gone back and forth many times over the rate of it.
How we're always DMing about it. There's so many DMs between you and I of you just being like, what the hell's going on with play action? And then the next week it's like, they did more play action. I'm happy. And then the next week it's like, what the hell? They went down again.
The Seattle game felt like seeing a unicorn. It was so fun.
Dude,
it was so fun. And granted, like I remember, I have to find my tweet, but I quoted the rates at the time of like what their highest was. And I think it was only like 25% or something like that was the highest that they actually hit in the season. And they still didn't even get close to the top of the league as far as rate. But that to me is a potential strength. That's something I wonder when you bring up the mixing of all the new odd formations or different concepts that they're introducing that they don't typically do, and things that, you say like they're doing this now, this part of the year. It really does make me wonder if they are saving things in the tank for the playoffs. But more importantly, these past couple weeks have almost been like this is a stupid term, but a fuck around, in the sense that like, hey, we're playing against what we deem inferior competition. The game plan's vanilla, but also an opportunity for us to just try these things out against teams that have nothing to play for, that if it works, great. If not, we'll go back and see the pain points and improve it for the playoffs. And why I just touched upon play action specifically is because that's, to me, has been the thing that I see Josh ball fake, and I see all the opportunity in the world for this offense to go toe-to-toe with any defense in the playoffs. And it's not a knock on the skill that they're going to encounter. It's not saying that I'm blind to the fact that there are talented teams that could shut it down. It's the time it gives Josh Allen to make a play, which is what this offense has to be predicated on. It's allowing Josh to get a second to either see the field and know that he has that deep shot. And if not, he has an option underneath. And if he doesn't have either, the chance to make a play and live to fight another day, or the chance for, if the play somehow gets blown up, off script chaos Allen, which when it's used sparingly, opening Pandora's box is actually productive for the Bills offense. It shouldn't be. I'm not saying rely on the fact that you can mess up your blocking, your protection, but rather it gives Josh a chance to make a play. And that's the biggest thing for me, because what you alluded to with how effective it can be and how that could put defenses in hell when you can run effectively and then run play action off of it. It just caters to the strength of this offense more, which is your quarterback and the arm strength he has, the 3 levels of the field that he could throw to, but what you can dial up on these play action shots, especially if the run game is working. And now all of a sudden these guys that we have as blockers are running a dynamic route off of maybe if you have a tight end that's in line, or maybe if you have someone who was lined up out wide who could break in. There are so many more rooms for this offense to be explosive, so much more room for this offense to be explosive when you introduce it more frequently. And that's something that I feel could be a strength. But the actual tangible strength is what you alluded to, which is why I wanted to just build off that, because I was literally just going to say the rushing attack. And just like weaknesses of the offense, what we touched upon before, Ant, you can go more deeper into this if you feel like there's more to add. But what you talked about with the separation and structure, I do think is a legitimate issue, but where I feel like they have some maybe homering optimism is just the fact that even though the separation isn't all that consistent, in the times where you do need to dial up a deep shot to someone like Keon Coleman or maybe Matt Collins, I do like the frame that these guys have, and I do like the fact that the big hands and the frame allow you to not really need to get 3 steps on the guy, but rather just enough at the catch point to be able to bring a ball in, which I've seen from Mac and have seen from Keon, albeit not consistently. So I'll turn it back to you just to call out any weaknesses of this offense that you want to call out that maybe we didn't touch upon, or go deeper into that before we pivot to defense.
I think some of it, like you said, we touched on it a little. I think some of the deep passing game here, even today, I'm trying to find it. Kendall Mursky tweeted it out. Allen's touchdown pass to Cooper today, which was an amazing play by Cooper. This was Josh Allen's first deep passing touchdown this season. So a passing touchdown of 20 or more air yards. So wow. Yeah, right. Like, so the some of the concerns I had before they added Amari Cooper, really just anything outside the numbers and then deep. It almost felt like there was kind of like a shaded out area for that offense because of the lack of speed they have at the wide receiver position, lack of verticality, separation, all that kind of stuff. And again, it reared its head a little bit with the Patriots, and I tweeted it out after the game against the Pats 2 weeks ago. Well, no, last week. So the Patriots, they did a really good job with single high stuff, especially in cover one. Various pass offs, hole players, lurkers, robbers at various levels, landmarks. They were doing a bunch of different things to stifle the Bills' pass game, but they had a 61.8 cover one usage rate and a single high coverage rate of 76.5. And so those are both very high, even more considering their regular season numbers. So the Patriots play the second most cover one on the year at 37.6. So again, their rate against the Bills was 61.8. That's crazy different. And then they have on the season a 59.8 single high coverage rate, which is eighth. They dialed it up to 76.5 against the Bills. So my concern really just stems from when you play teams that have good or athletic corners. Can you win against those guys? Do you have the speed? Can you win with the physicality and frame? Is that enough to overcome the lack of separation in the route stem or separation on the release? Can you separate at the catch point? Can you consistently play bully ball and play above the rim if you're Keon Coleman, or find the ways to scheme up Khalil Shakir? Does the screen game keep working? Does the over the middle aspect of the offense keep working? Can Dalton Kincaid get a little healthier and factor more into this offense as a true mismatch creator and kind of force multiplier potentially for the offense? That's really my biggest concern, because if you can't separate in those ways, the in-structure passing game struggles, which we saw today. Granted, I have to watch the tape to see why, but that's really what we saw against New England. Like, there was struggle with the in-structure passing game because there wasn't a lot of separation for a variety of reasons and ways, but a lot of it stemming from the coverage. And when you are able to play single high, if you're the defense, that means there's more bodies in and around the box and the line of scrimmage, which means it's usually going to be harder to run because now there's more bodies for gaps instead of just bodies on bodies. So now the run game gets a little constricted. Allen has to put the cape on more, and it's hard to live in that world consistently. Granted, they can still do it. It's just a little harder. So that is really where my biggest area of concern lies, especially when, again, you look at the teams they're potentially going to play. Like, if they play Denver and you've got Pat Surtain over there. And so it's like, okay, like, do they put him on do they put him on Cooper to try and take away Cooper? Or do they just put him on the number 2 and completely erase the 2 and double Cooper somewhere else? Or, what do they want to do there? Like, you look at what they can do, what the Ravens can do, what the Chiefs can potentially do. So that worries me a little bit in terms of being able to find success in the pass, in structure, against man coverage, against single high coverages in general, how that ties into mitigating the success the Bills can have on the ground, all of that added together. I think it doesn't have to be a perfect cocktail in terms of how the Bills can lose, but it's possible given the quality of opponent you're going to see. And again, all it takes is that one stupid game, and there's no course correction to get after him the next week. If you lose, you're done. So that is my biggest area of concern for the offense. And again, with who is in the playoffs, defensively, structurally, how they're built, I think there are several teams that could give that in-structure passing game problems.
And just to build off that concern more, because it was something I kind of alluded to when I talked about this game, the worry for me for the Bills is when you talk about the run game being their strength, what happens if game script has to take you out of that?
Yep.
And I think about that Baltimore game a lot.
Oh, yeah. There you go. Yep.
Yeah, that Baltimore game is the glaring concern for me because, one, you could very well encounter Baltimore in the playoffs alone, but that's exactly what happens. Baltimore gets off to an explosive start, the immediate Derrick Henry run that takes you completely, puts you in a deficit and a hole early. Your defense is not able to get off the field. They're giving up long chunks of possession that lead to touchdowns, and you don't have the luxury of running anymore. And when you can run effectively, you can control a game. When the game is away from you before you can run effectively and you have to throw more, that is going to then fall into that same concern of, well, now if these guys are up against just really good corners, can they separate and can plays be made? What I will say is I think they can. Not separate. I'm sorry. I should rephrase that. I think Joe Brady can scheme it up to, at the very least, keep the offense being productive, even with just the threat of the run. And I do think that you're not going to stop running just because it's the first half and you're down 14-0. But I do worry about what happens if this offense gets pressed early, if they get punched in the mouth early because of their defense giving up an early score. And it's kind of why I want to see what would happen if they are the ones to score first on a team that does the same thing to them. And why I think, honestly, the literal first possession of a Baltimore game can be so huge, because I wouldn't be stunned at all if the Bills decide that they want to have the ball first if they match up with the Ravens, if they get that far, score early and see what that does to Lamar and Derrick Henry as far as RPOs and what they want to run. It's not a knock on Lamar as a passer. It's not a knock on Henry as a rusher, but the game script component, which you have it in your name, game script enthusiast, but really just like the idea of what this Bills offense does well, controls games, runs the ball physically, grinds out drives. When you don't have the luxury to do it because time is now of the essence for you as an offense, and Josh has to air this ball out, what are defenses going to do to take that away from you? And how in turn does that, do you overcome this really? So that's my big concern for the playoffs. And there are teams that can absolutely score early on you. Cincinnati did it to the Bills in Buffalo a few years ago. I don't want to live in that world. Please don't make me live in that world. Carson Wentz, 5 interceptions on Sunday, please, next Sunday. But either way, you have to play who's in front of you. And if it's not Cincinnati, it could be Baltimore. If it's not Baltimore, it could be Kansas City again. If it's by some way, the Chargers end up coming to Buffalo. If I don't even know if that can happen.
Even the Broncos a little too. The Broncos want to go heavy and run the ball down your throat. And Baltimore and Kansas City, I know, are the big ones for everyone, but you can't let any team be able to run and throw on you. Like, you have to be able to isolate one of them. And for a team like the Chiefs and even the Ravens, like, and I've said this on social a bunch, like, I know the Chiefs are the Chiefs and they're really starting to peak at the right time because of course they are. But if you look at like every team in the AFC, like from an offensive perspective, and imagine like, oh, if every offense hits their ceiling and everything clicks, who's the scariest? It's Baltimore, because they're a buzzsaw in every way. So you have to, like, Lamar has gotten so good as a passer, both in structure and out. But that's what you have to live and die with, because if you have to live with that and also defend the run game, like, it's just so hard. Like, you have to isolate one of the variables. And Kansas City's in a similar way. Like, when Pacheco gets going and they're able to just grind out 4 to 6 yards a carry, and then now they can pass the ball in a variety of ways. Their play action game opens up. I mean, the blueprint that the Bills are following, the Chiefs laid this out a couple of years ago. You talked about it. They went away from Tyreek Hill and everybody was like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And they were like, no, we're going to do more 2 and 3 tight end sets. We're going to have an average depth of target of about 6, and we're going to run the football, and we'll get explosives in play action if we need to, but we're just going to do a bunch of little to medium chunks in the run and the pass, and we're going to do that, rinse and repeat, and then we're going to play good defense behind it, and good luck. So you have to be able to isolate one of those aspects. And the game script is such a huge component for the offense, but also for the defense, which I'll speak to in our next segment.
For sure. And just the one final point on that. I mean, I think about the Ravens a lot in this example, not even just for the game, but what they can do to you, because they can win both ways. The rushing attack is as prominent as ever when you have Derrick Henry in the backfield, but it's also Lamar's ability as a runner and Lamar's off-script ability. And the fact that you can marry that and have Lamar almost seem like he's taken off and then all of a sudden just go off script and Z-axis throw across the field. Like, that's the danger you're running into in the playoffs. So for the Bills, controlling game is paramount. And if they can't do it, I'm not saying they can't overcome that, because we've seen the scenario where Josh has to throw the ball 40 plus times and accomplish great things. But also sometimes those games are against weaker defenses. I mean, you look at the stretch run with the Rams and the Lions and the Niners. The Niners were banged up. The Lions were horrifically banged up, and the Rams are talented, but they're still kind of blossoming as a defense, right? Like, there's still pieces there that you could say are missing. So Josh can afford to throw 40 times against those teams and put up points. But when you're in the AFC juggernaut with those really disciplined defenses like Kansas City, who knows you well, like Baltimore is beginning to know you well, Denver, even LA, who I think has a lot of talent, and we haven't spoken about much, but LA is definitely a tough matchup. That's what you got to prove you can do. But again, blind optimism is, hey, maybe you got things in the holster. Maybe those weird, wacky things were just little garnishes of what you can expect in the playoffs. And maybe the things that we have concerns about might be mitigated just by Joe Brady being able to feel the game out and call things accordingly. And for that reason, I'll remain hopeful. We'll see what happens. I'm praying it's a good outcome. Moving on.
I think that's fair. Real quick, I think just anything, and this isn't necessarily a knock on the Bills, they can win a game where they have to pass like 40 times or more. They're not built to win that way. Like, can they? Yes. This offense and this version of the Bills is not built to win that way. And on top of that, there aren't really many offenses that are. If you think of the best offenses in the NFL, they are built off the run. They're built off condensed formations and or reduced formational width and running the football. The Rams, the Niners, the Lions, the Eagles, like, there is some semblance of, granted the Eagles are a little bit of a unicorn with what they got, and same thing with the Ravens, a bit of a unicorn as well. But think of that. The run game, play action, condensed formations, all that kind of stuff. You don't have a lot of offenses now that are just coming out in 3x2s or 3x1s and shotgun and spreading everybody out and chucking it all over the place. The Bills aren't built to be that team, and not a lot of teams are anymore because of the way defensive football works.
You make the argument that maybe Cincinnati, just because they had Burrow, dish out 49 attempts yesterday, but even then, like they could have very well just as lost that game in that same structure. So it makes a ton of sense, and it's not a world I want to live in for the Bills. But to put a positive spin on it, it's not a world the Ravens want to live in, as you just alluded to.
That's what I'm saying. Nobody wants to be in that way, and even the Bengals, it's like, well, the Broncos have a really good the Broncos have a really good run defense. You can get them a little bit in the pass. The Bengals aren't the best run team, so it's like, okay, let's lean into this a little bit. And again, it can work in one-offs or in spurts, but it's not what someone's core identity is going to be right now in NFL football, especially the Bills. I think Matt Collins has been tremendous, and Keon Coleman has been nice, but you're not going out there and leaning into your wide receiver group, considering what the depth chart looks like. And Curtis Samuel's banged up and all these guys. You have to take advantage of the body types and athleticism combination, and the way to do that is with the run game, play action, and everything that ties into it in terms of alignment and formation.
Absolutely, man. I completely agree. And, there's pain points there, but I do think that this offense, specifically the running game, the way they've pivoted and what they've built for themselves, it's a formula that I think can win you playoff games and can win in the winter. And I think that's what they've wanted, because for years past, we've seen this offense be that style you alluded to when you talked about Stephon Diggs, kind of a bit more finesse passing style. And when you ran into a physical team, it was a punch to the jaw and you could never overcome it. It's a team now that I feel a lot more faith in being able to sustain that rushing ability against any defense. I mean, their trenches are solid. They're physical. I think Dawkins and Brown, just as tackles, have been phenomenal in the run game this season. But even their interior, for as times where they can get pushed back, they also can dish it out. And I really love what they've built there. I love the use of Anderson as the sixth OL being a consistent staple. I think when they go heavy, they just have a chance to beat anybody and get effective. And if that's the world they have to live in, where they're just the heavy bully, and that's what they're going to do to win games, I'll live with it, because it's winning games. So that's the important thing. We're going to move on to defense, Amp, but before we do, I'm just going to give a quick plug to the One Pass. I am wearing the shirt right now. This is our shirt that we have partnered with 26 Shirts to create for all of our One Pass subscribers. The link will be in the description of this video. For just $60 a year, you have the opportunity to become an insider, which is an awesome thing for you to do, because it gives you access to great perks, such as the chance to get this shirt, our giveaways, as well as our Discord, which has lively discussion basically 24/7 with an amazing community that you should definitely be in tune with. So check out the description. This month's giveaway, which is a Josh Allen jersey, is going to be announced on January 3rd. I'm excited to do that. But we appreciate everyone who subscribed to us. That One Pass is the lifeblood of our network. It allows us access to all the resources we use on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, second-per-second basis. So thank you for being an insider. If you're thinking of subscribing, link in description below. Anthony, same topic for the defense. I'm going to turn it back to you. I'm sure this one could be a lot lengthier, but I am very curious, however you wanted to structure it, positives, negatives, positives. Tell me how you're feeling about this defense in the playoffs.
So I'm a little shaky on the defense. My thing all year, and this is something I've talked about since week 1 against the Cardinals, it's part of the reason why I have Game Script Enthusiast on underneath my handle here on the video. I think the most important thing for the Bills' run defense is game script. The way the Bills have consistently been able to stop the run this year is with numbers, bodies, run blitzes. They are not stopping the run tremendously with their front four. They have to bring a safety down. They have to run blitz. And you usually see that. If you think about, if you're just a fan watching the game, think about the games where they've been gashed in the run versus the games they haven't. Or think about the games where they've been gashed in the run and they've gotten better as the game has gone on, or flipped the switch from the first half to the second half. What do you normally see? You see Bernard blitzing. You see Milano blitzing. You see Dorian Williams blitzing. You see guys attacking because they're trying to stop the run with bodies and or run blitzes. And that's fine. But to be that as the main reason of or the main way you stop the run is at some point going to present a problem for you against the pass. So you're going to get sucked in versus play action, or if you guess wrong and you blitz at the right moment or the wrong moment, or you're playing an athletic QB and they escape out the front door or sidestep or step up. It's just anytime you blitz is very risk reward. When it works, it's awesome. If it doesn't, you're in a problematic state because you don't have guys in space because you allocated them elsewhere coming forward. And overall, looking in this Bills defense, so going into this game against the Jets, some advanced metrics for the Bills. Defense. They're 28th in drive success rate, which is the percentage of down series that result in the first down or touchdown. They're 28th in 3 and outs per drive. They're 26th in plays per drive. They're 25th in time of possession per drive. They're 25th in stops per drive. They're 32nd in punts per drive and 27th in touchdowns per drive. All of those you want to be higher. Like, it's not one of those like, oh, the lower you are, is any of those better? Right. No, the lower you are, the worse you are. They are, however, first in turnovers per drive, which we saw rear its head again today against the Jets. If you look at the Bills defense on third down, again, coming into the Jets, 31st in EPA per play, 32nd in EPA per pass, 14th in EPA per rush, 17th in pressure rate, 18th in sack percentage, 25th in yards after contact per rush, 21st in yards before contact per rush, and 25th in rush yards over expected per rush. But they're first in stuff percentage, which is the percent of runs that go for 0 or less yards, which we saw on the fourth down on the opening drive that turned the ball over, which again, right. I know fourth downs don't count as turnovers, but it really kind of does. It's just this nature, this duality of the Bills defense. And again, a lot of it ties into how they like to operate philosophically and ideologically. They are, let's get up front, let's create havoc, let's get a tackle for a loss, let's get a sack, let's get a turnover, something to put the opposing offense behind the sticks or behind in the scoreboard, and then use that game script and weaponize that game script. And it ties into how the Bills play football offensively as well. That's that whole complementary football aspect. But if we're just looking at it down in and down out, I worry about this defense consistently getting stops. I worry about this defense against the run. They have gotten displaced far too much this year, starters included, although as we've gone forward, Daquan and Ed Oliver have gotten better each week against the run, but their second wave of guys, it's just been brutal. Austin Johnson has been great. I'm sorry to do this to you. Dwayne Carter has not been good. I still don't get how Elianku isn't on the roster each game because of what he can do against the run, but okay, to each their own. I don't think Phillips offers you too much. I know he's played his best snaps as a Bill, but it's still just a dude. Jefferson has been just a dude, like easily replaceable. Their spine, I'm worried about because they can get displaced vertically, especially, but it can happen horizontally as well. And then when you don't have those bodies on the defensive line causing havoc and taking up blockers, now you've got offensive linemen climbing to the second level where you don't have the biggest or most physical linebackers like Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano. They want to shoot. They want to trigger. They want to be able to see and read. You don't want those guards and tackles climbing and getting bodies on Milano or getting bodies onto Bernard. And so I worry about the run defense and everything that stems from there. I have said this all year that the Bills' best friend or the best way to stop the run has been game script because they get up on opposing teams and the opponent, like you talked about with the Bills offense, the opponent has to be like, based on the time left and how much we're down, we got to start throwing the ball more. That's been the Bills' best friend defensively is the offense putting it up enough points, combining that with a turnover or one stop or two to get the offense out of running the ball. And then if that doesn't work, the way they stop the run is with numbers in terms of blitzes or just bodies in the box. But then again, when you're doing that, when you're run blitzing and you're committing more numbers to the box to stop the run, that limits what you can do from a coverage structure perspective. It also limits what you can do from a disguising coverage perspective. Yeah. So it just puts you into a world that you necessarily don't want to be, especially if you're Sean McDermott, who in his heart of hearts wants to rush for and put numbers into coverage so he can be as versatile and multiple in coverage as possible. So that's my biggest concern. I just don't think they have an ability to stop the run consistently without committing numbers and bodies to do it to really gap out. And considering again that you probably have to play Kansas City, you probably have to play Baltimore, you could potentially play the Chargers, you could potentially play the Broncos, like these teams that want to go heavy, fullbacks, run the ball, some kind of combination of personnel, downhill run game, and then the quarterbacks that they have our offensive system around it. Again, varying levels with all of those teams in terms of threat level. But that's where my concern lies. Just some of the metrics are really not good, and it matches what you see on tape in certain ways. But I think a lot of the concerns have been mitigated or swept under the rug because of game script, making those things go away, or because of, tide turning moments, which is awesome. Like, it's sweet to have a team drive the ball 80 yards down your throat and then you get an interception in the low red zone. It's like, oh, that's awesome. But can you continuously live that way? The Bills have been able to, which is awesome. And maybe it is a genuine thing that they're building in every single week. And it's not just happenstance or luck, but if those turnovers run dry, what happens there? I think that's part of the conversation as well, in addition to all the run game pieces and everything structural that kind of stems from that for me.
So I completely agree with you. And what I think is interesting about this conversation is we've used the term to describe the Bills season as a transitional year. And yes, they are likely to finish with, whether it's 13 wins right now, 14 wins, however it may fall. I think what's interesting is lost in the success is the blemishes of them being a transitional team, or are the blemishes of them being a transitional team. And I think the defensive line, specifically the interior line, which I've praised, you were there. I was wrong. I will say that. But
you weren't wrong. You were just hopeful and optimistic,
which I can be too much of at times. But when we talk about transitional year, that in turn has to reveal that there is a part of the team that is still going through some sort of pain point, something that still needs to be refined. And I think that rushing defense that you've talked about, that in great detail, it was an excellent point. I think that's where the weakness is and where the transition is really happening. And why I say that is because in years past, when you talk about what the Bills' offense was, it was an offense that was so explosive vertically down the field with the receiving core they had, able to air the ball out, able to go into a lot wider, empty more consistently, because that's what they were known for. They were the air raiding passing attack of the Bills with Josh Allen and his cannon arm. Because of this, when you have teams that can run the ball effectively, grind out drives, it's not that you didn't have to worry about it, but I felt a little more comfortable because I knew that there was always the chance Josh Allen could just chuck a 40-yard deuce and that was it. And they're right back in this game. All that effort and energy you just spent to grind the clock down just got made up for in like a minute and a half. Again, not the fact that it would always work, but that you had that. Now this offense is predicated on, as we've talked about, working game script in their favor, running the ball more consistently, grinding drives out, being able to build off of that in structure. And it's great. But when you have a defense that can't do that, can't defend that, that's where I have concerns and where I think the defense is headed for is a more sustainable model to support this type of offense, which is beefing up those trenches, getting more physical in the interior, maybe adding more size, not even to the front seven, but in the secondary in this upcoming draft and free agency class, where now, rather than the concern of being able to be ran on consistently and not allowing your offense to play to its biggest strength, you have the chance to shut down the run, generate positives in your rushing defense more consistently, and in turn, McDermott, just being the guru as he is with his coverage schemes and being able to disguise, can just do this as it is. Obviously, talent matters, the personnel matters, but I have more faith in him being able to lead a defense to still have that strength with a more fortified, beefed up size interior. I think right now, this is a defense of the old guard of the Bills, which was one that was able to be explosive vertically more consistently, where time wasn't as much of the essence that they could pull it off. Now, because you don't have time as a factor and you do have to rely on it, this defense getting gashed is a nightmare to think about in a playoff game against Kansas City, against the Baltimore Ravens, against even the Chargers, Broncos, whoever it may be, because that is the direct path for teams to take you out of this game. The direct path. It's not a secret to anyone. It's not going to be a surprise to anyone. If they are generating chunk plays of 5 to 7 yards, even on a first down, good luck trying to control a game with your rushing attack, because this team, unless they can bear down, get more physical up front and mitigate the run, is going to be susceptible to just having the game get out of their hands before they can get their steam, which means you're forced to be put in a position where you have to start off fast or it's already away from you and you're playing catch up the entire time. And that scares me. And to further your point about rushing defense, which is my biggest concern, size is my biggest concern, because I think a lot about what I've seen from Ed Oliver this year. And Daquan Jones isn't a small guy by any means, but he's also not T'Vondre Sweat size. He's not the biggest guy. I think about their linebackers. I think about Milano coming back, who's been rusty, although it seemed like he had a better game today. I think about Bernard. The shooters, the speedsters, the missiles. That's great. The thumping ability of the Bills is there. It's real. It can be effective. But when you don't have size against teams that can maul you downhill physically, that's a weakness. It's just a glaring fault in your defensive structure. And it's why I think, for as good as this season has been, my confidence level in a deep playoff run is in the balance when we think or talk about this rushing defense, for the reason of, it's awesome that they can run the ball now, and it's awesome that they have this physical team, but I don't think this defense, with the way it's built right now, is built to complement the offense, because I don't think they've had enough time to do it. I think this is a multi-year long process of reconstructing the defense to get to that point where there's more beef in the interior, where size is of the emphasis for their IDL. And therefore, if it works because you get the guys that can actually generate that push consistently, it can actually complement your offense. It can actually give them more consistent opportunities to have teams throw the ball, even if they're successful with passing, not take time off the clock. And here you go, the ball's back in your hands, do what you do best. So I think that's where it kind of all comes together for me. Is this is a transitional Bills team, really more so what we thought would be offense in the defense. A young coordinator with an interior line that has not lived up to the hype, although Ed had a good game today. Ed has been playing better as of late. Can they sustain that in a playoff run? I don't know. And it worries me. And I think the size and the guys you go up against, like the downhill maulers that Kansas City has and Baltimore and like freaking thinking about Denver, anyone.
Quinn Miners, man, is a Monty plays like that. If King Kong like was a guard, it's Quinn Miners.
It's scary to think about. So I think your entire point is completely correct. And I just feel like right now, the Bills just simply didn't have enough resources, enough money, enough time to build the defense in the image of what they truly want. And I'm hoping that this offseason, whether this team makes the run and wins the Super Bowl or not, that's the emphasis. I'm going to cap this whole thing off by saying, do not be surprised when most of this draft is defense. Because most of this draft, in my opinion, is going to be defense. I'm talking if they have 10 picks, at least 50% of the picks are defense. It's going to be D-line allocation, fortifying the interior, the successor for DaQuan Jones, but also the successor for Epineza, who's going to be on his final year of his contract, and Von Miller, and fortifying the depth. And I'm a psychopath. I would be happy as a clam if this team devoted 4 picks to D-line. I'm not even joking. I would live with it. You might think, I know, it's an eyebrow raiser. It's crazy.
No, I'm a defense first guy. I am all about building out the defense. I do not care. I agree.
I want I've been just getting, as a side note, I've been just getting started on looking into these guys a little more extensively. And there's some dude, some of these edge rushers are insane. But it's not about, I'm talking about IDL. I got to stay focused. That's the problem to me. And the size that the Bills have in the defense, it's not that they can't be effective, but when a team just has your number and you can't shed blocks consistently, what do you do to pivot? Does that pivot exist? We're going to have to see. And I just feel like it's not a complete defense yet to complement the offense. So, and any final thoughts before we wrap this one up?
No, I think just within that conversation, it's still they operate on, going to the Ilianku part, right? Ilianku doesn't offer you a lot of pass rush pop. And they want their fronts to be able to penetrate against the run and against the pass. And you just haven't gotten that, from Austin Johnson, from Dwayne Carter, from Jordan Phillips, from Quentin Jefferson, from all the guys they've kind of tried on the interior there. And so it's okay, if you're not use Carter for an example, and I'm sorry to do this to you, but my thing with Carter was even at his tape at Duke, it was man, he's getting blown off the ball by double teams. But okay, he would give you some pass rush pop and you could penetrate. So I was okay, the trade-off a little bit, similar to the receiver conversation we had earlier, right? Okay, you trade off some separation for ability to block a little bit more to make your run game better.
Right.
But he just hasn't had that pass rush pop. So it's okay, you're getting displaced, you're not impacting the run, and you're also not rushing the passer. What do you kind of do from there? And I think that's just emblematic of, or symptomatic, I should say. Emblematic also kind of works, of this kind of front and how it's attacked offenses. And it's very, I don't want to say all or nothing, but they live on both ends of the extreme because their EPA per play numbers are good, but sometimes their success rate numbers aren't. So it's they will get gouged. The first drive against the Jets is a good example. You're getting gouged and gashed left and right on the ground. And then it comes down to a 4th and 1 and it's a negative play and it's turnover and the ball for the Bills. And that's how they just live. They're used to, okay, you'll get us for 6 or 7 or 15, but then we're going to get you for -2, or we'll get you for -3. Now you're in 2nd and 13 or 2nd and 12. We're going to bank on the ability to keep you a little bit behind the sticks and make it at best 3rd and 6 for you, but probably 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9. Now we can lean into it and get you off the field. And so some of the metrics still speak out, from an EPA per play perspective, and even success rate on some weeks, it's working out, but it is very risk reward. And when they are successful, it's because they're committing numbers to the box or they're run blitzing. And It just takes the wrong blitz at the wrong time to take you out of it. And because they're not a blitz heavy team, this isn't a Brian Flores defense where they install on day one is blitzes and the coverages behind it. then it starts to get a little murky in terms of responsibility, getting fooled, not. It's just, live by the sword, die by the sword. And they're not that kind of defense. It's risky in general, but even more so when that's not your bread and butter in the type of world that you live in. And so having success by having to do that against the run, again, which can work. And I still do think it takes a specific game script and type of opponent to be able to put everything together offensively and defensively to beat the Bills. But a lot of those teams exist in the playoffs, and it's just harder to live that way against those better teams.
I completely agree. And, even talking about today, there were several reps from the defense where they stacked the box and still got gouged for a big run too. Yes. So just fundamentally speaking, they'll still try to make those adjustments, but that's really when it scares me, when the adjustments that they made to clearly sell out to stop the run get completely squashed because they just aren't big enough, or they're just not in position, or they're just getting blown off the ball. And it worries me. So I think those are very valid criticisms of this defense. I am really looking forward, I guess, for better or for worse, of what the, immediate attack point for this defense is when it comes to how they want to improve in the playoffs. Like, is there a fundamental change in what they show? Do the blitz numbers go up more consistently? Are they going to be good at blitzing? Because that's another thing too. They don't blitz often and they can hit home, but there's also several reps you can see from this team where the blitz just does not work. And it's just the second I see, I think it was a few weeks ago, I think I saw Dorian Williams come on a blitz and he gets picked up. Second I see that extra man get picked up, I'm like, fuck. This is going to be 15 to 30 yards minimum. It's a huge game.
You saw it a couple times versus New England. Gibson would pick up Williams, and then you're like, uh-oh, the guy that you thought was going to be free isn't there. And I think that also ties to the pass rush too. For as good as Rousseau has been and Epinesa has flashed and even Vaughn, you don't have a lot of dudes up front that are consistently getting you a bucket. You don't have, that's why even Leonard Floyd last year, he got hurt down the stretch, but at one point he was their best guy that Floyd can get you a bucket, but Rousseau is productive, but I still don't think as a pass rusher is that guy that can get you a bucket down in and down out. Vaughn has been nice, Vaughn has been nice, but not that guy. Epinesa has some wonderful flashes, but isn't that guy. So that ties into it too. If you're not getting there with the free runner, and it is a simulated. Now you've got non-traditional coverage guys in coverage. So if the blitz doesn't get there, are they going to get taken advantage of? If you brought numbers, you've got less numbers in coverage. If it gets picked up, is the quarterback going to find the void? Again, that's the whole reason, blitzing, the risk reward nature of it.
Right.
And even with the run blitzing is even more so, because if that gets gummed up or picked up, and now everybody from that second level is committed, and you've got guys running in between the second and third, there's all this space because they ran a run blitz on first down to stop the run, but the offense ran play action and gummed it up, or they ran a pass and now it's a quick hitter or it's a screen. And it's just, again, it's the nature of football, the chess match, right? But when you put more eggs into a specific basket, it leaves less eggs for other baskets, and it starts to reveal tendencies. It opens up vulnerabilities. And when you've got a full season worth of tape against the best teams and the best coaches, that stuff kind of tends to get exploited. And so that's that cause for concern.
And it's just, again, for a rookie coordinator like Babich, that game feel, how is it going to look when you get into the playoffs and it becomes more imperative to recognize those situations? And, what's going to be the difference between what he calls and the execution? Is it the right call in theory, but they just simply didn't execute? Or was this a bad time to send 5 or 6 man pressure when you could have dropped into coverage and at 4? It's that, like you talked about, that back and forth that I'm really interested in watching. But, I don't want to end this totally on a downward turn, because I do think there are positives for this defense. And again, the turnover ability of the defense, I don't think that's by accident. I've never thought that's by accident. I know luck plays a role in how the ball bounces, but generating opportunities is a real thing that this defense can do. They're very much go-getters when it comes to attacking the football, see ball, get ball. It's a real thing that, the corners are instilled with how often they're trying to punch it out. Their linemen do it, but also the freak length of their edge rushers and how that can sway things and generate turnover opportunity. This is a defense, you use the term pinball to describe Khalil Shakir in the past, but I almost use it to describe this defense. When you talk about havoc, when you talk about the chaos that they ensue, it's not a pretty defense, but honestly, you could think back to the Chiefs defense of old too, where they were a defense that could get ran on, thrown on, and you could actually score on, but they would just get turnovers for their offense. And that was what they did. We'll see if it happens in the playoffs, but I don't think turnover luck is, or I should say turnover opportunity is luck. I think it's something that this defense really does try to make happen, maybe to offset some deficiencies. And that's why I think I wonder if blitzing is going to get turned up in the playoffs for that exact reason. Because even though there is a bit of a gamble when you blitz, it's the fact that paired with a defense that wants to generate turnovers by either mixing coverages or punching the ball out of your hands straight up is a defense that's going to come after you a little bit more and get you to kind of fear them a little bit more because they're getting on you a bit more. I think the mental side of the game can be impacted by that philosophy. So I hope they do, because the 4-man rush system is great when it works. We don't have that. I'm just calling it what it is. Maybe to an extreme. I don't think the Bills as a 4-man rush team are the best they could possibly be as one. I think that foundation could be laid out in upcoming years. But with Von, Groot, as you talked about, like the guys that can't consistently hit home, I don't think the 4-man pressures are, to me, it's just not a team that I think can live in that world in the playoffs. I just simply don't. But will they? Probably. I worry about it. So it's just more so like I want to see the uptick in pressures, because I think paired with those turnovers that they're able to generate, you get a team that's just showing you serious aggression, but also because you know that they can get a bucket with their coverages, or at the very least just generating those opportunities that could lead to success. And if it's not pretty but effective, I'll take it. Because honestly, sometimes you just got to get down and dirty when it comes to the playoffs defensively. It can't always be buttoned up clean and everything can't go your way. So I'll leave it at that. Any final thoughts before we cut it tonight?
No, this is a good football team with strengths and vulnerabilities, just like every good football team that exists at multiple levels of football. And I think the way they play defense can help their game script on offense, because if you can turn the opponent over and give the ball back to Josh Allen in this run game, and then you grind out, points and drives, it, puts an opponent's offense behind the 8 ball even further. So again, just this episode wanted to frame the strengths and weaknesses and what to kind of expect and what you could see a little bit. But this is a good football team. They didn't get the 2 seed by accident. They didn't beat the Lions by accident. They didn't beat the Chiefs by accident. This is a good football team. They're seasoned. They have a lot of playoff experience. It just comes down to putting your best foot forward each game and how much of a matchup league this is. And there's some matchups that don't favor them, especially compared to others. And we'll just see how much they can mitigate those weaknesses and or vulnerabilities or areas of opportunity, however you want to label it, versus play into their strengths. But at the end of the day, this is a good football team. They didn't end up as the 2 seed by accident. And I'm really excited to kind of see where they could go forward, especially considering this was a revamp year with a lot of questions before it all started.
And to branch off that, I mean, I agree with you. I think to get to this point was all from the fact that, every single player and coach were just positively contributing in a year of uncertainty. I thought Joe Brady had an excellent year. I think Babbage has been good. Despite some defensive deficiencies, they've still been an opportunistic group. Josh Allen has refined himself and played very efficient ball. I don't think these traits of this good team are going to go anywhere. It's just a matter of, in a one-game do or die, can you show the best version of yourself? Which, if you believe in this team, you believe they can, and we'll just have to see. But even so, with all the discourse we've had around them, I carry the sentiment. I still don't think this is the best version of the Bills. I don't think this is the best version we're going to see for the next half a decade even. I think there's plenty of youth infusion and roster development still in the works. And what you have is a team that's simply ahead of schedule. And I love every single bit of it. And I think what they could blossom into, if it can't be this year for a playoff run or a Super Bowl run, it could become something where we're talking about a team even more imposing than the ones you saw in 2020, 21, and so on and so forth. So I'm encouraged. I'm optimistic. We'll see what happens. But Ant, as always, you're a tremendous guest, one of my favorite people to talk to, bring on the show and rant to about, football or planning for New Year's Eve. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge to any of my friends watching this. And tell the people what you got going on, where they could find you, and what happens next in the chapter that is your story.
Fair. Thank you for that. Be better with New Year's plans, people and folks in general and friends of Joe. I'm Anthony Prohaska. You can find me on Twitter at pro__Ant. You can find me on Blue Sky at ProAnt. No underscores there. I host a show called The Skies Coverage that airs every Tuesday, and I co-host the Cover One Film Room that airs every Wednesday. The film room obviously is very heavily film focused, but a lot of advanced metrics, concept, scheme, structure, as is my individual show on Tuesdays, again, titled Disguise Coverage. Last week, I did a 40-something minute film breakdown on the Bills' increased pistol usage, what it means schematically, conceptually, pulled some quotes from Sean McVay about why he leaned into it in 2023, and then broke down a bunch of tape in terms of the pass and the run, what it means, the variety, the versatility, the multiplicity, all that kind of stuff. So everything for me is film, structure, X's and O's, scheme, concept, player evaluation, position group analysis, the bones and, everything that comes with football, along with some advanced metrics, kind of put it all together and piece it. And that is me.
Yeah, if you have not checked out any of Anthony's content, I strongly suggest it. It is not just a disservice for me to not tell you that, but it's a disservice for you to not check it out. He is one of our best. I mean, I learn something from Ant every show, but really I've learned so much from Ant in the time I've been at Cover One, so I cannot recommend enough you to go check out Disguise Coverage and the film room he does with our own Eric Turner as well. It's well worth your time. He's worth the follow on Twitter. It is always something that's going to just every single tweet teach you something new. And there are people in the football world that I think you can avoid and people that you should keep up with. And Ant is absolutely one of those people you should keep up with. And for me, I appreciate all of you being here. Again, a bit of a wonky schedule. My name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter /X, the forsaken place, at show_DeRosa. I'm also on Blue Sky at joe.derosa.bluesky, or I think it's just Joe DeRosa. I don't even remember my own handle. It's bad. But this show, I mean, I had a blast tonight, Ant. This was an awesome episode. And listen, I know we touched upon a few pain points with this team, but there is a lot to be encouraged by. And I am very pleased that the Buffalo Bills are able to walk away as the 2 seed from today. And hopefully we get a nice long playoff run that we can be happy about. But in the meantime, everybody, I hope you enjoy your holiday. Have a safe and happy new year. I hope you enjoy the time with your family and friends. We will see you very soon. I will be back next week with another episode to review right before the playoffs and their upcoming matchup. But for right now, we will say goodnight, so long, farewell, happy New Year's. And as always, go Bills. Take care.